Hi guys, and welcome back to Manch Talk. I'm Carla Garrick, your host here in Manchester, New Hampshire, in the freest state in the nation. Today is going to be a very crypto-focused, heavily crypto-focused episode, and the reason for that is the image you can see behind me here. Tomorrow up at the State House in Concord at 10 a.m. there will be a rally in favor of Ian Freeman, who many of you know from Free Talk Live, but he has been in prison since December 2022 for crimes that I will discuss as we go on here. But I want to talk today really about Ian's case in the context of other crypto pioneers who have also been subject to lawfare by the federal government and who are also still facing really bad sentences. So I wanted to start with the following. Bitcoin Jesus, Dread Pirate Roberts, and Free Stater Ian Freeman walk into a bar. Just kidding, they're all in prison. So if you don't know who Bitcoin Jesus is, I will start with him. Roger Ver, I believe is actually the right pronunciation, is currently on the island of Mallorca in Spain, where he is facing extradition to the United States and 109 years in prison. For what, you might say? Well, let me tell you. They're saying he is guilty of tax evasion. What he is really guilty of is writing this book, Hijacking Bitcoin, which, guess what? The government doesn't like. Why don't they like it? Because it exposes the state for the crimes against all of us by hijacking Bitcoin. And his position is basically that the intelligence agencies got into the mix with Bitcoin back in probably whenever the fork was, 2014. And since then, we have not seen the promise of Bitcoin, which so many of us believed would happen, actually happen. So Roger, back in, I believe, the mid-2011, I don't know what the date was, but he actually renounced his American citizenship. And he became a citizen of St. Kitts down in the Caribbean. Why did he do this? Because he was a Bitcoin pioneer and he kind of saw the writing on the wall, I think, before many of us did. So Roger, renounced his American citizenship. As part of that process, he decided and instructed his attorneys to pay all the taxes that were required at the time, and then left the country. He describes himself now as a digital nomad or a citizen of the world, although he is, as I said, a citizen technically of St. Kitts. So I originally met Roger way back in the day. He came to PorcFest, which is the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which, as you can see here from my little porcupine, is a Free State Project-led event that takes place here in the great state of New Hampshire every summer. It's the third week of June, and tickets are actually already available. So if it sounds like something that could be interesting to you to come to, please plan to attend. It covers things like crypto, like we're talking about today, but also food freedom, sort of kids programs, a lot of thinking around decentralization and how we can actually go maybe around the state for things to do innovations to solve the problems of the government, much like crypto originally wanted to do, or Bitcoin specifically. And, Roger came out, he was really the first evangelical that I met who was talking about these things. Candidly, I didn't even fully understand the technological side. I was just very drawn by his intelligence and his integrity and his vision for this kind of money, which was supposed to be peer-to-peer payment systems that could compete with other currencies like the US dollar, which of course is the reason why they don't want it to become what we wanted it to become. And he came out, he talked to us about Bitcoin. I mean, he's the reason why I got my first Bitcoin and spent it, so don't get too excited, for $6. He was a very early investor. He bought his first Bitcoin for under $1. But at the time, he was already a millionaire who had created value in the market with his ideas. So a tech guy who was super smart, who really just wanted to spread the message of what the original vision of Satoshi was with the white paper, that we could create a peer-to-peer payment system that could compete with other currencies. Now, he wrote this book. This book is not popular. If you want to learn more, I highly recommend you get it. But when that book came out, 2 weeks later, he was at a conference in Spain, and some Spanish guy came up to him and asked him like 4 times, maybe 3 times. It's almost like the story of Jesus. Are you Roger Ver? Are you Roger Ver? Are you Roger Ver? When he confirmed, they were like, oh, hey, well, we're narcs and we are going to pop you. So originally, the government did not think he would get bail, but to Spain's credit, they did let him out on bail after 1 month in prison, in a Spanish prison. And he made this very interesting observation on Tucker Carlson. And if this is a topic you're interested in, I highly recommend. Tucker did an interview with Roger back around Christmas time last year. It is still available on YouTube. And one of the things Roger talks about is he says, the experience of being in prison really reinformed the idea of what is money supposed to be. So money is supposed to be durable, it's supposed to be transportable, divisible, recognizable as money, and hard to counterfeit, right? So in prison, as we've all seen from like the shows and stuff over time, ramen noodle, top name noodles is a kind of currency. Cigarettes are a kind of currency. Apparently banana wine might be some kind of currency. And I actually remember when I was back in college doing my MFA in New York City before I moved to New Hampshire, I reread one of the books, I think it was a Primo Levi book, about the camps during the Second World War. And in that, I was struck at the time by how pieces of bread, and a comb were kind of used as currency within it. So why do we care about money? Do you understand where money comes from? If you don't, do you think maybe you should? In fact, I was driving here and I had the radio on and they gave us the new inflation numbers, and inflation, of course, is up because it doesn't matter what they tell us. You, for yourself, can actually see that eggs are more expensive, gas gets expensive, our electricity is expensive. Why is everything expensive? So everything is expensive because the Treasury, colluding with the Federal Reserve, which is a private company, are colluding to dilute dollars by printing more and more of them. Even a 4-year-old can understand basic monetary policy, which goes the following. If you have 1 of something, it is valuable to the 1. If you then make 100 of those, then you have diluted it, and now you only have 1 out of 100. So that's basically what they're doing with our money. Since the Federal Reserve was implemented in 1913, the US dollar has, depending on how you measure it, but I will be conservative for the sake of the show, lost 97% of its value. So when you're reading an article and they talk about dollars in 1980 or whatever. So you're reading an article and it's like, oh, this house was worth $250,000, but now it's worth $1 million. That little sentence is actually telling you how they've diluted your money. So when you think about economics and you think about free things and you think about what the role of government should be in our lives, you really, if you're going to make informed decisions about what you think the government should be doing and paying for, then you actually have to understand where money comes from and how it all works. So of course, Roger does understand that. He also understood that lawfare can be quite dangerous, and he understood that the US government could be dangerous, which is why he renounced his citizenship. So what did they do to him? I mean, this blew my mind, and then I'm going to get into Ian's story, which will equally blow your mind. The IRS raided Roger's tax attorneys who are based in America's offices. Let me repeat that. The US government raided some dude who they were going after in a criminal case. They raided their lawyers. Now, I don't care what side of politics you're on, you have to be on the side where if we do not have rule of law, if we do not have things like, actually, there's attorney-client privilege. This is how the legal system has worked for all of time. If we can't have these basic things that are the basis of rule of law, then we don't actually have a functioning society anymore. Now you'll see down here, I have a little sticker that says, vote Trump to free Ross. Maybe you can't see it, so I'll just lift it up so you guys can see that. So of course, Ross Ulbricht is, the Silk Road founder, right? And he worked under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. Now, why was that? That was basically, it was inspired from the novel and, of course, the movie that most of us have seen, Princess Bride. And the idea was that these notions get passed down from individual to individual, and then eventually it's kind of like almost like a collective knowledge. It's not just one person who's responsible for things. Now, Ross Ulbricht, we are very optimistic, will be pardoned by Trump come after the inauguration. That was a promise that President Trump made to the Libertarians at the Libertarian Party convention. And I remain deeply optimistic, and I think we should, because, what does it help worrying about things that we can't control? We can only hope that good people will do good things. So Ross, I think out of the three of our candidates here, is most likely to be in line to actually receive a pardon. And if you want to find more information about Ross Ulbricht, you can go to freeross.org. They really have the history there. Now with Ross, and this is why it ties into Ian as well, back in the day when they arrested Ross, which was back in 2011, they popped him in a library in San Francisco. He was working on his laptop. They came in, they raided, stole his laptop before he could close it. That whole case is like super murky. But the important part there was the propaganda done by the state against people who genuinely aren't actually even breaking the law. They're just doing things that the state doesn't like or that actually subverts state power, like trying to actually create a better money system than the one that has trillions of dollars invested in the corruption and the immorality of the money system we have now. Because what does money fund? It funds the wars. Every single one of these three candidates, both Ross, Ian, and Roger, are on record that the reason they pursue these ideas does stem out of both human individual liberty, the right that we should be able to use money in ways that we want, to buy the products we want, but also to stop the corruption of the state and to stop wars. Now, the irony of actually going after Roger and saying he's doing tax evasion while letting billions and billions of dollars go to the Ukraine, where we now know many of those oligarchs are buying, houses in Switzerland. I guess a bunch of them actually own properties, million-dollar mansions down in LA that got burnt down, and now they're butthurt about that. And I'm like, dudes. Anyway, so with Ross, he does stand on the cusp of getting pardoned. But back in the day, no one wanted to really pick up his mantle and pick up the banner and talk about his issues. So I was one of the first people that platformed his mother, Lynn Ulbricht, who has done yeoman's work over the years to try and free her son. Ross was sentenced to 2 life sentences without the chance of parole. What did he do? He built a website. Now, granted, the website did sell drugs, but you know what? So does eBay, so does Facebook, so does X. Now, why aren't the same powers that be going after those websites and those CEOs? Well, between all of us, we know the reason, right? They're not going after them because they are targeting these crypto pioneers because they pose a true threat to state power. Now, Ian's case, Ian Freeman from Free Talk Live, Free Keen, he's a Free Stater. He's been involved here in the Free State Project for a long time. He's a colorful figure. He and I have not always seen eye to eye. I mean, once you've worked with people for 15 years, there's going to be history and there's going to be baggage. But I wasn't paying the world's attention to Ian's case. I did attend 2 of his sentencing hearings, but I didn't go to all the trial. So I had this sort of arm's length idea about what was going on. Also, candidly, because of the way the state poisons the well before they charge someone or right around the time they charge someone, I was like, I don't know what's going on there. I don't even want to pay attention. But where it bubbled up again for me was I found these articles by Jacob Hornberger, who is, he writes for the Future of Freedom Foundation. And he did this fantastic 3-part article. It's a good read. It's, you're going to have to sit down and actually pay attention. But the headline, which should be really your takeaway for today, is the unjust conviction of an innocent man, the Ian Freeman case. Now, before I even tell you about, any of that, I want to just stop for a second and talk about the big lie. Now, what is the big lie? The big lie is something that the government seeds out into the world that is an untruth, that is so unbelievable, it kind of shocks your sentiment, like it shocks your brain, and you're like, what? So a couple of examples that might ring bells with you. Weapons of mass destruction. That was a literal big lie that the government seeded in order to go to war against a country that was not responsible for 9/11. And they used it, and then years later, they were kind of like, oops. And what are you going to do? Now you're already embedded in a war in a country where countless people unnecessarily died to make the warmongers rich. Because that's the end of it. Everyone talks about the nobleness and, we're going to go do this and we're spreading democracy and we're whatever the story is they're telling you. It's wars for profit. And that is what they're doing. So that was one big lie, weapons of mass destruction. There was another one, the one about the Iraqi babies in the incubators. Do you guys remember that? Because it was alarming and scary, and you're like, babies, and they're dying in the incubators, and the whole thing was made up. So when Ross Ulbricht got arrested, The big lie that was seeded into the atmosphere was murder for hire. So when you initially looked up anything to do with Ross's case, you would run up against this. And so you're like, wait, what? I really want to like this guy and support him. He seems really principled and awesome. But also, what? He hired people to murder people. I guess the government's going to tell us who he murdered, who he had murdered, who he paid for. Oh, turns out, never even charged him for that. All they did is they put a lot of nonsense stories out on the internet. Why does that matter? These big lies are seeded so that when you go do your own research, if you're at least responsible enough not to believe everything you're being spoon-fed, then you start looking, and then the first 3 pages of the internet, not on accident, on purpose, give you information that poisons the well. It makes you think the person is not honorable, or that the stories you heard aren't right because, oh, look what all these people are saying, right? Oh, this guy tried to kill people. No, he didn't. He wasn't even charged with it. So with Ian, they did the same thing. And one of the things they did is they used the words scammer, fraudster, and other terms that are really denigrating to a person who, as far as I have ever, even though we don't always agree on stuff, is a person who's always struck me as having impeccable integrity. And the big lie means that when you search for any information on Ian's case, you get pages and pages of scam, romance scams, hurting old people, taking old ladies' money. Now, here's the actual facts. Ian Freeman owned a Bitcoin ATM. So let's think about it in the simplest terms. He had an ATM that bad people scammed old ladies. The old ladies came and used his ATM, and the government said that makes Ian the scammer. Now, if you want to follow this logically to its conclusion, then if anyone has ever drawn $100 out of an ATM and used it to snort cocaine, then whoever the bank was that owned that ATM is equally illegally operating something that should be taken down. Now, of course, that doesn't happen. Again, why not? Because it isn't equality under the law. This is targeted against crypto pioneers who are trying to innovate and solve the world's problems. So honestly, when I went to Ian's trial, it was up at the Federal State House down in Concord, where we will be gathering tomorrow at the State House, 10 a.m. I hope to see everyone there. I sat through the sentencing, and they had all these, I mean, it's hard to even say, but like these bitter old ladies testifying one after the other after the other. And because I hadn't been paying attention to the case in as much detail as perhaps I should have been, I was sitting there and I was like, man, this sounds bad. This really does sound bad. But then on the other hand, I was like, but why are they having women who, I mean, like one lady, I think she took all her life savings out, like I want to say it was like $750,000. It was a significant amount of money that she sent via Bitcoin to someone she had never met in real life, that she thought was in love with her because he was sending her messages on the internet. And this lady's sitting there and telling her story, and I'm like, how does this even relate to Ian's case? It doesn't. So that was the government's big lie with Ian. Now, I hope you're as astounded as I am when you realize Ian is going to be in federal prison for 8 years is what he's facing. Now, he does have an appeal on his sentencing coming up. I believe it's on the 4th or the 5th of February. But, you know, his entire name is now associated with, you know, fraud, being a fraudster. The government's press release that they put out after his sentencing said he was catering to fraudsters, that he was in a shell game where he turned a blind eye to the scam artists, where he was a conduit for others. Do you hear? He didn't actually commit any of those crimes. So his basic charges was for income tax evasion, failing to register as a money lender, which under New Hampshire law, because Free Staters wrote a Bitcoin bill that said you don't have to register if you are only operating your Bitcoin ATMs in the great state of New Hampshire. So that one shouldn't even have been a charge. And then he was convicted of money laundering and conspiracy to money launder. They dropped all the fraud charges before trial. So exactly in the same way that the murder for hire charges against Ross Ulbricht were introduced, they sullied the well, they poisoned your minds, and they made you believe things about people that are not true. It's not on accident, it is evil. So I invite everyone who is watching this to please do the following 3 things. Go to freerogernow.org and sign that petition. He's asking for a pardon from Trump as well. If you're the one person in the world who hasn't signed the freeross.org, freeross.org is where the petition is. I believe there's over 500,000 or 600,000 people who have signed that. Again, we're going to remain cautiously optimistic that Ross Ulbricht will indeed be pardoned by Trump. Now, of course, Trump himself has been subjected to lawfare, so I'm cautiously optimistic that he will actually want to help these people. But for tomorrow, if you go to freeiannow.org, you can sign up for the petition. We're going to take the same tactics we did with Ross Ulbricht, and reminder that took 12 years from the first time I platformed Lynn here in the state of New Hampshire till the time we are hoping, because of promises that were made, that he will actually get pardoned. We don't have 12 years to wait with Ian, so go ahead, go to freeiannow.org. Please sign the petition. If you are in the free state of New Hampshire, and if you're watching this, please do come tomorrow, Thursday, the 16th of January at 10 a.m. Try and show up maybe like 20 to 10 or so. We will be meeting in the lobby at the State House, and we will be raising our voices together to say that this is not acceptable. We don't think he should be in prison. He should definitely not be in prison for 8 years on these charges. And pretty much he really didn't do anything wrong other than irk the government. So that's my story for this week. I want to remind everyone at home, if you would like to come to Pork Day, that will be taking place on the 2nd of February. We are going to go throw axes over at Rugged Axe in Manchester. Tickets are now available. Just search for Pork Day 2025. That'll be Sunday 2 to 6 p.m. And I would love to see as many people as possible tomorrow and follow this story about Ian. Let's see if we can get our friends out from under the government's thumb, because that's not where they should be. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys again next week. Thanks so much.